right, I'd like to call to order the special meeting of the Brookfield Board of Finance for Tuesday, March 8th. Turn it over to Bob.
Okay, and I'd like to call to order the special meeting of the Brookfield Board of Education for Tuesday, March 8th. I'm glad it's the same date.
Yeah. Start the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Yep. All right, anybody for public comment? No public comment. Okay, so I'm going to make a motion that we start with general budget discussions first. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, all in favor? Aye. So, first of all, thank you for Board of Ed of coming tonight. We're going to go through a few things. I want the public to know that we've already had the Board of Ed budget a long time. We've asked a lot of questions of the Board of Ed. They give us a 5-page, 6-page dossier of their questions as well. They have the answers that they've vetted through. So what I'd like to start tonight off is a basic, for the town, a basic budget discussion. What are we really talking about? When everybody says 0% increases, everybody says make cuts, everybody says, oh, we're gonna pick a random number of cuts. I wanna just take a basic moment to show the town what we're really looking at. So what we've done is, we took the town budget. Go ahead, Ryan, please.
Yep, so we took the town budget, as you can see, and the town expenditure budget is 20 million.
It has to be up and beyond.
It was up.
Yeah.
First, let's start with the pivot tables, and then we'll go to the
Okay.
summary.
Sure.
So start with the town pivot table. That's the cuts.
Sorry, yeah.
That's all right.
Okay, so this table here shows the wages in the town. So as you can see, the wages over year is an increase of 293,000 or 3.18% increase.
But the main thing we're trying to show here is, out of this town budget, right now, the town budget, 9.5 million of this is just in salaries. That's all there is. I mean, out of the budget's like 19 million. We'll go to the summary page. But the salary line of that is 9.5. So now let's go to the benefit line. The benefits just for the salaried people are 4.6 million. These are buckets that we really don't cut. We're not looking to cut. These are buckets we have every year that we can't get away from. Let's go to the Board of Ed side. We took their data as well and ran it through. The Board of Ed in their budget has $30 million in salaries. Let's go to their benefits. Their benefits is $8.3 million. Transportation. The buses, $3.7 million. These are all things we need. We need the people. Our people are our biggest asset in this town. So now let's go to the summary and we could talk to that, Ryan. Again, we put this in the pivot table so we could pivot out the things that we wanted to look at. Let's go to this summary page. Then the summary I'd put together, the quick summary, because I know. So again, the town's total operating budget is $20 million. Their salaries are 9.5. Their benefits are 4.65. That leaves the town budget $6 million left to spend. That covers salt, electricity, anything, anything that has to do with the town, supplies. The education budget, everybody says the education budget. Look at that, $48 million. How big is the education budget? 30 million of it's salaries, the teachers that we need to run the schools. 8 million of it's the benefits that are contractually we agreed to as a town. 3.7 million of it is transportation. We're not even bringing in special ed costs, another big chunk of money. So what we really have left is $12 million. So as a town, we increased the budget by, say, 6 million? No. Well, I'll get back to that number. So basically $12 million. And what we've done in this is, we are always trying to reduce or make cuts to get to a number, to get to a 0% or get to a number. And it's only going to come out of the $12 million. We're trying to take $2 to $3 million out of the $12 million. So in order to exercise anything, we are really cutting down on the services we're going to provide. Everybody says, oh, get to zero, get to zero. If we get to zero, unless we look at the bigger buckets, the salaries of our towns, the people that are really running our towns, you're not going to get there. You can only beat down supply budgets so many times. You can only get to paper clips so many times. The real budget is really only $12 million. It's less than that when you, like I say, we talk about special ed. When we talk about, I'm sure, Ken, there's other drivers that you have that are bigger numbers. And John, you shaking your head as well. I mean, this is minimalistic. Right now, we're minimalistic, and there's only $12 million left in the budget.
Utilities.
This was my exercise, because when people of our town hear the this $77 million budget, they're like, you could sure find $6 million in there. You could sure find $3 million in there. Where is it? Unless we're really going to look at salaries. And none of us want to do that. Now, part of this exercise that I was thinking of was, and again, we don't want to be here forever, so is what can we do to affect these buckets, these bigger buckets? Can we have synergies? We have 2 HR departments. We have 2 IT departments. We have 2 finance departments. We have an opportunity here as a group, a lot of us are 4 years on the Board of Finance, 4 years on the Board of Ed. Can we start to think about how do we affect that? Because you can only beat the paper clips down so many times. We can only beat supplies down. I mean, you guys cut textbooks every year. Every year we go through this budget process and textbooks get taken out. Where can we really affect the change that we need to bring us to where we want to be? Because we're not talking about a lot of money. It's a lot of money going around 12 million, but you can't get $3 million in savings out of a $12 million bucket. It's impossible to do. And Ryan, through all, this pivot, it really shows, again, we could take out more of the bigger things. So let's go to the Board of Selectmen cuts. So you can see here, again, the 200,000 is the OPEB, but let's go down to lower numbers. Let's go down, say, from, down in there. These cuts, how many times can we make these cuts? Forms and printing. I mean, how many times can we take $5,000 out of a $15,000 budget? How many times can you take, again, smaller numbers, let's go down. $4,000 out of a $15,000 budget, $3,000 out of a $12,000 budget, $2,500 out of a $3,000 budget. How many times can we attack those line items and get to where we want to go? What are you going to take out next year on, with these line items? The 25 out of the travel and conferences, 335. Unless we're not going to do any travel or anything to better our town, we can't exercise these cuts every year. It's impossible to do. So again, we got to start thinking as a group, how do we get to where we want to be? What do we do? Dan made, at our last meeting, said operational changes. What kind of operational changes are we going to make to get us where we want to go? Now, since it is budget season, I think the state statute says we can't suggest these operational changes. We can't dictate policy. We can't dictate anything. But we can say, is this something we can look at? How do we get this money? So we'll go back to this later. Let's go to I guess we can go, anyone want questions on this while we're talking about it?
Is there a line that shows the actuals from last year on this chart?
Actuals are here. Not actuals, it's just the budget line item, so. we don't have actuals.
This is the whole data of all budget. It's all in the pivot table. He can roll it any way we want to roll it. He can.
I don't have actuals in my pivot.
Oh,
Right, that budget, this is the actual budget.
Okay, because I was going to say, if that was from this budget document, those are actuals.
Okay.
So what would you like to see?
I was just gonna say that it would show what was spent last year, which is why some of these changes were recommended.
We're not attacking the changes. That's not the exercise here. What we're showing is your department asked for so much money. You brought them down. We can't, every year at some point, they're going to ask for money, they're going to need it. We can't, you're not going to get the amount of dollars we need out of these small line items. You're not going to get it. We have to affect bigger line items. The bigger line items that got taken out are all things that really we need to fund at some point. The $200,000 of OPEB, we need to fund that at some point, and Bob is on the OPEB committee as well. We need to fund these things. So the bigger items here, you know, that we've taken out, we're going to need them at some point. So, but that's not for tonight. This exercise was just to get us together because you guys are the stakeholders. You, the first select woman, and the Board of Ed are the two stakeholders in the budget. So in order to exercise these changes, we got to figure out a way to get to where we want to go. So let's go to the Board of Ed budget, the 3-year plan. So this is something we've shown before. What it does is it shows where they're going to be over the next 3 years. And we can talk to these numbers, Bob, John, and Ken. So what I did is I took last year's budget. You can see prior year, 46 million. It's down to the 416 number with the minus of the 300,000. That number's wrong. Somehow got messed up in this process. But the number, that's if we put it back. What I'm trying to say is here, if we keep in the salaries, which we're not going to get rid of anybody, and the investment only on the ESSER grants, you're still looking at 3.1 to 2.899 increases. This is where tonight we have to talk about this. This is the main questions that we have is, now go to the ESSER grants. What's driving your 3-year spend is this document. This is the document that's driving your 3-year spend, other than salaries. Right? I mean, salaries are what they're going to be. So let's go down to the bottom of this. That's what's driving it. So in this ESSER ARPA grant, we've added in a math tutor, a science instructional coach, a social studies instructional coach, a social worker, and a 0.5 therapist. So this is, for the discussion tonight, is these positions, are they crucial to your operation? I mean, I'm sure they are, but this is the question we ask. And if we put these in and fund these, is that going to be sufficient for your next 3 years worth of investments? For us to really get behind this, we can't have another $200,000 worth of investments next year if we agree to this right now. The numbers are going to get big, and I think that somehow Cell got messed up in that thing, because I think those numbers are higher, if you want to know the truth, and I got to go back through that. But this is the crux, I think, of tonight's meeting is we went through your budget hard the past 3 years, as you're well aware. And again, we've gotten rid of we fine-lined, we've really streamlined it. We've leaned down your budget. This is driving it. Is this what you really see as the next few years, or do you see adding on more needs than these positions? I guess that's my question.
Yeah, so on that, I think that, you talked about a lot of stuff there, Glenn, and a lot of good things that are both for this year and for, the longer term in terms of synergies and things like that. But in terms of the Board of Ed specifically, this is more, I see this budget this year as the first of a 3-year plan. And we're kind of approving the 3-year plan as opposed to just approving the individual. Granted, sorry about that. Outlier, fire drills happen, things happen. But if we're kind of commit to this as the investment plan for the next 3 years, and this is year 1, that makes some good sense. But if this is kind of a, we're going to do this, and then next year there's going to be other stuff added to that is already known, it's probably something that we should have a discussion about, because the adding of the operational expenses with the grant was something that took a little while for me in particular or I can't speak for anybody else, to get my arms around. And the way I got my arms around it was, I liked the way you laid it out the last time we were at this table, because I hadn't seen that before, about here's how we're laying it out, and here's how we're going to phase it in. And it was even referenced that it was the investment aspect of our going forward budget. So we just want to, reiterate that and make sure that's still the commitment.
Okay.
Yep. So that was my interpretation of what you were saying.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's, I don't really have a lot of questions about your budget. I don't think we do as a group. I mean, Eileen?
I had one thought that just came to mind thinking about the new school opening. And if we're looking at this for the next 3 years, is this taking into account a new school where we're consolidating, center to Candlewood Lake Elementary School? And I'm just wondering if those factors were built into, staffing is going to be different because the building is different, and I know we always talked even on the new school project about it wasn't going to be an elimination of positions because you still have the same number of students, but the spaces are different and how they get schedules and that type of thing will make a difference. And has that been considered in these investments also?
So, do you mind if I just do a general
please.
reaction? I know,
Yeah.
I didn't know if we moved to the questions to the Board of Ed or if there were.
Yeah, no, I apologize, because I wanted this to be more
Yeah.
open conversation than
So, look,
before.
that's not our 3-year plan.
Okay.
That was a what-if model that Glenn has worked up with some percentages and
Yeah,
how the
yeah.
professor is.
I meant more this
I
ESSER,
understand, but
yeah.
if we were gonna go look at a multi-year plan, we've
Yep.
already said in the new building, there's a couple $100,000 of savings
Yep.
when we're all in there.
Okay.
right? It's a lot of heating, there's a lot
Yeah.
of utility cost savings and things like that. We don't see a lot of that next year.
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
But we see the following year, that will be an offset, and we knew there was gonna
Okay.
be an offset to the bubble of the ESSER rolling in.
Oh, that's good.
And so, if we were to build a more fulsome 3-year plan.
Right.
Yep.
You would see that more forthrightly.
Okay.
right? Because I think that's something we have anticipated, and we're actually looking forward to that.
Yeah, right. The energy efficiencies
Because
alone,
an
I think, will make a
energy-efficient
difference.
building after 2
Yeah.
very old buildings is
Yeah.
gonna be good for the,
Yeah.
it's not just good for the budget, it's good for the environment, it's
Yeah.
good for the town, it's good for the kids who are in the school.
Yep.
So I like actually the way you're modeling here.
It was
but-
crude. It was so crude.
No, I like it. But it's a question of whether we want to flesh that out and show the pluses and the minuses. And to answer your question, Dan, is there will always be some number of, things that come up that you have to deal with in budget. We really, as you saw, we really worked to minimize those this year. There were 1 or 2 discretionary items that we said we really, like for example, eliminating the pay for play for the ice hockey team was a proposal, right? And if it wasn't affordable, it's not affordable. We just think it's a good thing to do for our town. But there's other things like increasing enrollment, right, that we had to go deal with, right? And those things will continue to come up. And by the way, if enrollment were to drop down, those would be opportunities. We have special ed things that happen every year, some up, some down, right? We've had a couple of years where it went down, but more often than not, they've been going up over time. So I do think we will have the vagaries of the budget process. But we walked in as a board assuming we have very little in the way of true investment in the next couple of years, because ESSER, which was intended to be a program to allow for incremental spending, right? That's what it was, is incremental spending. In a school setting, it's not so much one-time things, it's things you're doing to support your kids, which tend to be operational, and you don't give them up lightly once you have them, which is why we showed them rolling in.
Right.
There were some items in there that don't turn into budgetary items because they were one-time things.
Yes.
And we look for those. So, and I would love to have the ESSER money go out as long as we can to kind of ease that impact of it folding in. But we're not walking in assuming our next 2 years have a lot of investments in them, right? We really aren't assuming that.
Right, and that's what we were trying to get
Yeah.
this understanding,
Yeah.
I guess, is what we're trying to do between the two boards.
Yeah, but I think we could probably, I can't commit the staff here to do a lot of detailed work, but I think take your model and take it a step further and throw in some known things like the savings for utilities and stuff would help with knowledge a lot, so.
I think this year, because of this ARPA, there's a lot getting put in that's gonna carry on along, because usually you don't add 5 positions in a year. This is not what we do commonly. Generally, it is 5 positions, and I'm not saying it's wrong, so let's be clear, but this is a big jump from 0 to 5. Usually you add 1 or 2. I get we had to add the 1 person in the budget because of state mandate, and that, came up, but we're adding these positions.
But these
in.
5 aren't being added into the budget this this year. They're grant funded for the
Correct.
first year. And what we've been, let me finish.
Yeah.
We've been carefully trying to ease them in over time, right? Because we
Yes.
knew that we couldn't afford 5 all at once, right? And I think you know that, we know that. We have eyes open. We've all worked at, as you said at the beginning, we've been at this a while together. So we all are very sensitive to try how we roll things in.
Right, but our commitment now is for these positions to roll in. And that's what I'm trying to
Right.
say. This commitment we make this year commits them out already.
No, I understand.
And it's
That's
not
why
each
we-
year standing on each year, because
Right.
we would maybe hire 1 or 2 this year, and next year, if we had a real bad budget year, we might say, well, we can't hire 2 people, we're not gonna do that, we're gonna wait. Now, we're making that, jump into, we're hiring all these people, and we're gonna roll them out for them. And you did step them in, I agree.
We stepped them in, and 5 in a year. We have done 5 in a year, right? It's, more often than not, in terms of real positions that we have to add, it's a couple, right? Because you can only afford so many, as you say. So, and that's kind of how we built this, and that's why we had long discussions about making sure we didn't do all of this money on ongoing and only did a portion of the money for ongoing, and did some other things that were one-time events. So, the other thing is, we've done a lot of technology in these, and we therefore our budget this year, one of the benefits of the budget is our technology new capital purchase in the technology budgets is relatively low, and there will be a point when that comes back, right? We have to know that, and it's out a little bit in time, but because we've got relatively new equipment in the district, but it's not out 10 years. It's out a couple of years. So.
One other thing before we get too far, when we start saying about the energy efficient, we got to be careful of what's the backfill, because we got to heat center school, we got to keep electric on center school. So when we talk the benefits or the what we gain, we got to make sure we include the backside of the cost to keep the school.
So what
up.
we did, so we're clear, is when we estimated the savings for the town for the new school, we always had a placeholder for keep enough heat so the building doesn't deteriorate. But
Right.
we did not put in heating for a completely new use. Right, that would
Right.
that would have to be justified on its own back.
Yeah, that would be its own.
We always netted that so that we weren't gonna just have blinders and take 100% of it. So.
No, I just want to, so we're all
Yeah.
clear. Again, this
And I
is,
said that right.
Yeah, no, yeah, and the other thing, and we get those numbers from the engineers that Tecton works with, so I mean, it's not us just playing around with the utility bills, it's actually looking at the usage and so forth. And Ken can certainly talk a little bit more detail if you have further questions on that. The other thing we do need to think about as the team here is when center school is offline, more than a year from now, that heating of center school, that's got to transfer to the town side because the school won't be operating it.
correct.
So those are-
It's
these
going
are
to,
things-
but it's still a cost to us.
Correct.
And
So that's what we've got to think about.
Right.
Yeah, and there's another cost, go back to Eileen's question, when we talk about investments, is the security for the new school when fully occupied. So, working with Chief Purcell, now working with Chief Puglisi and Major Frank, and talking with Mrs. Carr, figuring out what that's going to look like and where that falls in next year, not in the budget we're planning for next year, but the following year, when we're fully staffed and we have 1,000 to 1,100 students, and 200 staff members in one facility. And we've talked about some different formats of that. Does that come in the form of security guards that are trained and under the auspices of the police department? Does that come in the form of an SRO? What does that actually look like? And so we're still working on the plan. We have some recommendations from the police department. That's going to be another piece that we'll have to talk about in next year's plan for the following year. Just a big picture piece.
On
I
this.
do have
go
a
ahead.
question, sorry. I don't recall if it's in here or if we discussed it at the last meeting, but just if you wouldn't mind refreshing my memory, for A through G, were any of those items asked for within the last year or so? That just are repeat asks?
Can you, if you scroll up, you'll
Yeah, you
see
have to
some of them
scroll
were
up.
in this year. So they have the lines. So they were in this year's budget through through the ESSER grants.
They were not in the operating budget this year. They were
Implemented this
They
year.
were implemented this year,
Yeah.
but they're not hitting the operating budget till this coming budget that we're discussing.
Will be the first
Will
year
be
they
the
hit.
first year, and the amount of money that's hitting us is like $130,000 in year one.
Correct.
So this current year, all those positions we're working with, but it's at no cost to the town because it's under a full grant. Year 2, they're gonna roll in still some of the grant money, because they can roll the grant money over a few years. The 130 comes in the next year, we're gonna bring in 395, incremental 265, and then year 3, 176. So when we go to approve this in your budget, this rolls for the 3 years. And like Bob said, though, it's over time. It's
Did that answer
incremental.
your question? Maybe I could attack it a slightly
Sure,
different
yeah,
way.
if you don't mind.
We initiated, on the back of the money provided by the federal government, we initiated a number of programs, right? They're on the top part of this chart. And you can see there's the ESSER 2 grant and then the ARP ESSER. And these are the total spending that we did on those programs. So you can see some of them, if you can go down one step, no, the other way. The title, first column is titled 2021, 22, so this year.
So before Art Esser was a thing,
No, these were all new
Okay.
things for the town. These were, you can't use those grants to fund existing programs. They have to be.
or were they
incremental.
ever an ask before Art Esser?
Oh, yeah, so many of these have been asks,
that's
but may not have been
okay.
funded.
Thank
So
you.
for example, summer school, we've been wanting to improve our summer school for a long time. And so you can see under ESSER 2, we did 288,000 of spending this year. And the big drivers were the science instructional coach and the social studies instructional coach. These were to improve the teaching capability in the district, and then the summer school, and then some smaller items. And then down under the next group, you can see we started doing some of these programs this year. And these were, so the question is, how much was funded by the grant, right, the federal grant, and how much had to be funded in our budget? So if you scroll to the bottom here, we then peeled out and said how much is actually paid for out of the operating budget. So in the first year, all of those programs were paid for by the grant, right? And then over time, not every one of those items, you may have noticed the list on the top was much longer. These are the only ones that then we have to ease into the budget as we start losing grant money, as we've tried to spread that out over time. So you can see in the next year, and this current budget we're discussing, there's 2 items that total 130,000 that we've actually put in our operating budget. And all of the rest, if you scroll up, the 299 and the 40, so it's about over 300,000, is still being funded by the grant, right? And then so on and so forth across the years. And so we have initiated programs. Some of them are ongoing spend, and we do ease them into the budget, but they're decisions we've already taken, and as you said, we've made our bed, right? And you can always unmake the bed. You don't like to unmake the bed.
We're not
right? So-
looking to unmake the bed.
I think one of the
No.
things, and I think one of the things, Glenn, you're talking to people who might be listening in tonight too. It's important for people to know that as a superintendent and working with my superintendent group here in the western side of the state, we've exercised our leadership with our state superintendent organization, and they've really appealed to the State Department of Ed to appeal to the federal government to see if we can get an additional year to spend the ARP grant money to try to ease this transition. We're hearing that really isn't going to happen, but we continue to push on that because all the towns are facing the same kinds of things, and we know the impact to the local community, local taxpayers. So we're really trying to be as fiscally responsible as we can. We don't have a positive answer on that yet.
Yeah,
Just want you to know.
we're not trying to make the bed. I think we're trying to transition this now from working year to year on these budgets to going, like I say, looking at 3 years down the road. We built a trust amongst this group that I think now time, instead of being reaction to annual, it's time to be proactive for 3-year periods. And that's why I think that we changed this meeting, or we talked about this more of an open discussion to try to change the meeting a little bit to let's look at 3 years. What are we going to do? So we all have an understanding of what the next few years are going to look like as best we can.
And if I were to kind of put out my crystal ball, let's just talk about it. We have this ARP ESSER rollout in. That is, we're walking in with our eyes open that is the only major investment we will be making in programs, right, for our district, and because we knew that up front.
Right.
So we're relatively calm about that, and as I said, there's always vagaries of what happens with
Right.
enrollment and
Right.
special ed and things like that. I also, we are very union negotiation in our salary line. finance, I do a lot of watching what's going on with salary. And usually the way you work through salary negotiations is you understand where you stand against the rest of the state, right? Because you're competing for the talent we have. We are not the top in our DIRG or even in our neighboring districts. We're in good shape, right? We aren't losing a lot of people for salary reasons, but we're not. It's not like people are flocking to Brookfield because we pay more, right? There are districts who are known to pay more, right? South of us, in particular, in the Gold Coast, they're very high salaries, and people who, when they get way out of line, you do it. So that. What I see in professionals, and I say professionals broadly, it's teachers, it's administrators, it's nurses, it's even secretaries and paras. There's a going rate that's running 2.5 to 3+ in that range for salaries. It's just, you can see it. They're all moving, right? And one district starts trying to compete with the next district for people, and it all has a way of balancing out. And we negotiate hard on those deals. In fact, you all have had members of your committee joining us in some of those negotiations and see we do not give an inch, right, on our pay, but we want to be competitive because we want to retain our people. But I think the underlying going rate we should expect across salaries is going to run in the high 2s to low 3s, right, over the next years. And it could change, right? Inflation's crazy, right? It could change, but right now that's what we're looking at. I'll tell you, when I joined the Board of Finance in 2003, I got that same speech from the then chair of the Board of Ed, and it was 8%
Really?
was the going rate. Right? It was, and the reason was we were out of line with the Gold Coast, and we had to close the gap. And that was in the early 2000s. Those were hellacious budgets, right? We had to deal with. So we know that. We also have been watching the insurance rates, and I think we as a group, this is one of the places we have been working together the last couple of years, and we can continue. But we may have to be rebidding to keep insurance rates in check, because natural forces is driving that up as populations in the world are aging.
I agree.
And so that, those are our two big pressures, right? We're putting in this budget, we have a new transportation contract. It has a healthy bump, because when you do a redo of your transportation contract, it tends to get some new equipment in there, and you got some resets that go on. The rate of growth in the one we awarded to started up high and then goes a little slower. There was
How long is that contract?
5-year contract. So we have all the data on what the bid is, so they're locked in with a contract on that, and we can model that out over the next couple of years. What does it go over an average couple percent a year, I think.
I think it was 6% the first year and about 4% per year after that. Right.
And that's the nature of that beast, right? So those are the bulk drivers of our thing. And so the question, I go back to your question, are there places where we can find on the edges, places we can be more efficient, either within Brookfield or across Brookfield and others? That's a discussion we're constantly having on where regionalization, on things like finance and HR might work, or even cooperation within the town, but they tend to be small on the edges.
They're going to be small. I agree,
Yeah.
totally.
They're
But
gonna
if
be
we don't
small
start
on the
talking
edges.
about them, we're not going to move them. That's all.
And
That's
then we're
all.
going into a new building that has its, on the downside, it's a bubble of debt that we're dealing with. I know you guys spend a lot of time on that. We should see some utility savings, even netted for this center school, which plays in there. So there's a lot of moving pieces here. And I think we have our eyes open on investments, right? Not trying to bring a
This
lot
is an
of
understanding.
investments.
This wasn't a deep dive. This is just understanding. Do you have any more questions on this? Eileen?
Did that answer your question, Dan?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
I mean,
Mary?
I think we're all the same.
We're saying the same thing.
We're saying the same thing.
Ryan?
We do.
Go ahead.
This document was very helpful, I have to say, especially for somebody new on the board. One question I have, I see in here, and we all see the price of oil and fuel costs. I see in here we have not locked in. Is that correct still?
Ryan's going to talk about what we're doing.
That is correct. We have not locked in yet. We've been working with the town, and we had been getting advised, and I don't know if we've checked with our supplier recently, but the last time we checked, before all this trouble started in Ukraine anyway, he expected the prices to moderate again. So
Gotcha. And now, when we talk about
So let me-
transport,
Ryan, let me just underscore something. We have a shared purchasing agent in the town, and we rely on the advice we get. So just know the schools are not operating independently of that. When we tend to have a lot larger facilities, so for heating fuel especially, I think our nut is a lot bigger.
This was a known, Ryan. This delay to hold and hold off was a known. This wasn't like that nobody did it. This was a calculated that no one predicted the
Yeah,
Ukraine
I mean,
situation.
nobody
And you can speak to
The
it too,
other
Marcia.
little tidbit I'll share with you is the current year, we had a really low locked-in rate. So we've been enjoying energy rates at a lot lower level than you see in the market.
$1.61 a gallon.
$1.61 a gallon.
wow.
Yeah.
And the transportation cost, does that include diesel? Is that locked in, or is that something you will be
That's
facing?
it's a separate line item, and that has not been locked in either yet.
Okay, thank you.
To that
Okay.
point, just not to belabor the issue, but are there contingency plans should this thing go and escalate? And, I mean, what would happen in the case of this blowing out of control? Do we have any kind of plan?
From a cost point of view, or from an availability point of view?
Both.
I don't think we've built those yet.
We do have a contingency, that's why we have a 0.5% contingency in there. And when we talked about it, because we're both using the same percentage increases, which is, we were thinking about 50%, and now it's a little more worrisome. But we don't have to lock it in. And there was a discussion that we would talk about, what if we just waited to lock it in, and not lock in at these really high prices, and just pay them for a few months, hopefully.
But again, this was known. I want people to know this was a known, calculated, not guessing for the war type of thing that happened. This
But I
was
think it's a very good question, right? Which is where could we do some what-if cases and do some Plan B? You know, what would we do in this event and that event? What if supply got really short, right? What would we do? What if
that's operational. That's
No, it is. I
Yeah,
know it's,
yeah.
but the town and it was
Yeah.
a place we could cooperate, and I think that's a good discussion item. We ought to put that in the parking lot and go work on that.
So then let's go on to the next stage tonight. So you put forth your budget. We pushed you to get it out early. We pushed you, yeah, obviously you push yourselves. It comes out before the insurance number comes in. And we all agree that we move that number around because we're doing best guess at the time, or best, not guess, but best based on the quotes that we have. Your increase went up 208. So the Board of Selectmen reduced you by 91,000, which is a net of $300,000 to your operating line. What is that gonna do to you right now? We're having these discussions. This is the
No,
first
I
time we're having
understand.
these open discussions.
$300,000 is a lot, let's put it that way. We haven't met as a board to determine where we would have to take those cuts. None of us are relishing that, right? Because we had very little new investment in this budget. So that means we have a couple of options, right? One is, we've asked the superintendent and our director of finance to go through and say, with everything we know, is there any other possible savings, right? And we're working through those. It'll take a little time to sort that through. The second is, are there, you have to go after discretionary lines, as you started this whole discussion with, which we hate to do, but that's kind of where you go. And then we start looking at investment ones, right? And what we'd have to back out, right? And which I don't think even with all three of those, we get to $300,000, right? We are reluctant to go after the base, right? Where we don't have a lot of flexibility on special education, especially out of district. You'd end up increasing class sizes, and you would take positions out is what you would end up doing. Now, the one question I had for you walking in today, and it's a question back to you, is there any appetite to use that discretionary funds that we have had for underrunning the last couple of years. We had always said we would reserve a couple of percentage points of that to maybe use for this sort of situation. Would there be an appetite to, fund some of the ARPA things that help us in some other ways, or things like that? And so if there's room for us to have that discussion, I would welcome that, because it will keep us from going down to the bone.
I'll let everybody answer that, but yeah, obviously we'd be open to however to make this work.
Yeah.
Only thing I caution on is when we use discretionary funds, make them one-timers. Let's not like make it where we did double bit down the road. If we have some, I don't know what it is, but in other words, you're talking about pay ahead, right? Pay forwards?
Well, yeah, it would be either a pay forward or extend the ARPA curve a little bit, right? By what we're doing, right? Because you could use that, our own funding, to soften this curve a little bit, right, if we needed to. And that would be a place where I would love to have a further discussion there, so.
I think I'm open to it. Dan? Eileen, Mary,
I think
Ryan?
it's a precedent we set a few years ago, and it's worked well.
And so what I need is your help. We'll go to work on how we might work on that and come back with a proposal, but it would be, I need to know roughly how big an appetite we might, you don't want me to do $300,000 and then say, oh, no, there's not $300,000, Bob. So I have to kind of put some bounds around that. You don't have to answer tonight.
I know it's early in the budget.
I know it's early in the budget season, but are there some underrun items that you've already seen that I think I missed the last finance committee meeting, but I know that there are some savings we have seen at the last finance report to the Board of Finance. But
Ken, I'll let you talk about some of the things you've discovered, but there literally are measured in 10,000 here,
Right.
15,000 there,
Yeah.
type of things that we've looked at, so.
Yeah, and things have changed in the last month or so as far as our expenses are concerned. We're seeing substitute costs continuing to rise, professional services continuing to rise. It looks like our health insurance is going to come in over budget now. So I would say I implemented a freeze on non-essential spending today
Oh,
to make sure that we land under budget.
So the other thing I would tell you that I think is one way to solve this is how much risk we take on the salary line.
Yep.
Right, because we've taken $200,000 of risk for retirements and turnover there. We have 3 known retirements of very expensive educators that we know we're going to get some amount of savings, right? The question is, do we lean into 250, which is about what we yielded? That would be a partial solution, so.
When I looked at that, 200's the number. I studied that over 5 or 6 years, and I wouldn't want to push that number. I don't want to cut you guys either, but I don't want to push that number. All that study that I did on that, 200,000 is about the right number. If we push it, it's like inflating revenue to me. I don't want to get you caught out in a position where I'd rather if we figure out another way to fund this. That's my
fair.
opinion.
You guys pushed us a 2 years ago.
Yeah, it's
right, to
hard.
Put a little bit more risk in, and
Yes.
we did that. And it's been really good the way we've worked together on that with the contingency and how we do it, and we've actually achieved the number the last couple of
Yep.
years. The good news we have this year is usually at this time, we have no known retirements. People don't announce until the end of the school year, and this year we have 3 known retirements already that the people have already announced, and that helps us a little bit in our confidence, so.
I think we need to have this data by Tuesday, though. Can that happen? We have to make a decision by the end of next week.
We don't usually give you the solution on a cut
Right.
until after.
No, I'm talking pay forwards.
the
I'm
pay-
not talking
Yeah.
any cuts, the pay forwards. Can we have the pay forwards by Tuesday, the thought process? Pay forwards or the ARPA flattening out, can that happen by Tuesday?
Ken, what do you think in terms of that kind of time for us to look? We'd have to get with Marcia and see what kind of, that underrun contingency money, what that looks like, and then we could build a model off of that, I would think.
So I think that
3 of us would have to get together.
we have to just be a little bit careful, because you're talking ARPA, you're talking underrun, which we used to call the non-lapsing
Right.
fund.
Yeah.
That's what I was
We've
talking
taken
about.
that, we haven't been allocating that to the Board of Ed. In our debt policy, we took 50% of that and allocated it to things that we could do for additional appropriations for the whole town, and not just the Board of Ed, not just siphoning it off. However, in our 10-year, not so helpful model, that we have that as one of our one-time revenues. So I just don't want to account for it twice. That we just have to know that if we move it around, and just looking and working through the budget to actual for this year's revenues, we may have extra revenues this year to add to it, but I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page, that we don't spend it twice.
We do need something to figure out by Tuesday so we can put this into a process. And whatever you all decide, is you're the shareholders in this. This is your stakeholding. You're the shareholders. We need to understand it, because right now, in this budget, the way it sits is you're $300,000 down.
No.
That's the way this budget
and
sits
it will
right
be,
now.
and it will be harmful.
And we're not asking it to be harmful either, but we need to come up with a solution that we can maybe work through this a little bit. That's all. We don't have an answer. We're not going to dictate an answer right now. We're trying to see what we can work through with not the cuts. We're not talking the cuts, but how do we achieve getting this $300,000 back through other pockets, I guess, is the question that we have. And you would know that better than we would know that.
Some of that money, as she says, is not in our control, right? And I don't know how much to ask for, so I just...
I don't even know how much is there.
Right now, as far as, again, using that, it's like 775 is in there, and I'm trying to get the revenues projected for your meeting tomorrow night, and I think that we'll have substantial additional revenues this year to add to that. So the 775 is already projected out, but anything that we might have this year is not necessarily projected out. So I think by tomorrow I should have some numbers.
So then, Ken, John, Bob, you get with Marcia and see what we can put together for Tuesday.
Yeah. So what I would suggest is what you would logically approach this to say, here are some pull-ahead proposals, and I agree with you. You would only do those on one-time things.
Right. That's
There's not that many of them, but you would do some of that.
if
right?
it's 100,000 or 80,000,
Yeah.
then we're talking now 220 that we may have to find to fully fund you,
Right.
or maybe we could find 150 to get you to closer
and
stage.
then the question I would have is, if we have kinds of money Marcia was just saying, and we wanted to say, oh, maybe instead of 130, we'll provide a little funding from the fund balance and make that 50, right, or 60 for the following year, and then we kind of build it out over time and look at how you might spread that pain as you ease it in. So it's a weaning phenomena, right?
Marcia calls it flattening. We
Flatten.
flatten it.
Right, so we could go do, so I think there's two ways you attack the question. One is a pull ahead, and the second is this Art Besser stuff, right? And how you might make that work a little bit.
I'd be interested. I'd be interested in that, but I'd also be wary, because projecting beyond a couple of years with surpluses, they tend to disappear, or they tend so I'd be wary of forecasting flattening more than 2 years
Well,
out.
you can't. It doesn't ever flatten completely.
I
What
agree
you
with
can
you.
do is you can say, here's a proposal on how you would ease it, or maybe over the next 2 years, right? And while we're all still around, right?
Yep.
And we could look at that, and I think after that, the problem is the more you ease it up front, the more the cliff
Right.
is later. So you have to be very careful with it.
Yep.
So.
And I'd just like to add a last piece without belaboring it. When we talk about the pull aheads, we don't want to impact the budget so that next year we're here at this time having an artificial increase from where we are. So we
Can't
want to
do
talk
that.
about the one times, Glenn, like you mentioned. So it might be some furniture that we're planning to furnish, but that we only purchase every 10 years or something like that. Those kinds of things.
Right.
So, you know, Ken and I have done a little bit
Not
of.
much of it.
Yeah, digging in there, you know, I don't think there's, you know, I just want
We'll dig-
expectations
find
to be realistic. I don't know that there's 80,000 or 100,000.
I threw out a number, I don't know
I know,
either.
but we are looking for sure at those, and there is some of that in there, so we certainly could put that together as part of the proposal.
I mean, help us help you. I mean, if we
Yeah.
could find it, let's work together and figure it out.
creative.
But we make our decision by March 18th, is when we make our decisions.
So we have, our finance committee meeting is next
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
It's a Tuesday.
So,
Wednesday, we could have it. We can make it work on Wednesday.
so we
Your
could use
piece.
our finance committee meeting to kind of go through some what ifs.
Yeah, so Wednesday,
You
we
can join
can- we
us
can-
and we can exercise
we
it
can
and then
do
provide some
Wednesdays.
input to you.
Yeah, Wednesday. Wednesday, we can make it work. If we had it in the day Wednesday,
Well,
so we can
send
look
to you
at it.
Tuesday night after the meeting.
Okay.
Thursday, there's a potential meeting as well.
Yeah, so we could, I mean, by then we should have all the other pieces. ironed
Eileen,
out.
that was moved from the typical Monday because there's a negotiation, so you got that? Okay.
I have it on my Outlook calendar.
Great.
I don't have it on my personal.
You have any other questions, Dan, on what you'd like to see?
No, I thought,
Eileen?
no.
Eileen, Mary, Ryan?
I'm good.
Could I ask you a question?
Yeah.
It's one, I noticed in the capital budget that there were a number of items that were identified to be funded out of the town's ESSER funds,
Yes.
or whatever the ESSER funds. There were 12 items that had been brought forward by that committee, and there were a couple of Board of Ed items in there, and we didn't see them also funded, and I was just curious if there's a status, because one of them is the cooling unit for this room, and that if we're gonna go do it, we would wanna get on, and we wanna make sure it's in the capital project reviews that are coming up. So it looked like either we missed it, or it was chosen not to be done. So I'm not sure what the answer is, but this room gets really hot, right? And we actually ran our Board of Ed meetings in the auditorium because this room was too hot last month. But it was one of the 12, if I remember.
Is it on the capital
It
budget?
wasn't-
that
It
we
wasn't
got?
in the capital budget.
No, it wasn't in the capital budget at all.
No, it's on the ARPA.
Yeah, but so,
I wasn't there for that conversation.
right, so we certainly didn't address anything that wasn't on this.
I just didn't know if
this budget.
decisions in their entirety had
Didn't
been
come.
made
No.
on that.
Marcia
but-
would know.
There's two parts to the ARPA. It was kind of divided out by the selectmen. One is what would be used to balance this year's budget. And then there's other things that they're waiting for more information and a process and so forth. And that includes, it's still in there for right now, is building condition study. From 50,000, it was increased to 100,000. Building, no, that's town building. Rooftop air handler, air conditioning unit, you had for 90,000.
Yep.
That's in there.
But is that in the budget or no?
That's in the ARPA money. So if you take the ARPA money,
Bless you.
it's really three different sections. One is the lost revenue for 1.9 million. One is what will be used to balance this year's budget that was requested and throw the budget, like the ambulance and the fire truck. And then the third one is things that were requested directly to ARPA, sorry, that's us, that were
That's us,
never,
right.
that were never requested in the annual budget process. And so those, the air conditioning was never addressed it was not in the budget, so it didn't need to be addressed before it went to the Board of Finance. So I think that the Board of Selectmen is going to address those shortly, but they didn't, the deadline of getting the budget to the Board of Finance isn't involved in that. So those two are included, and then the one that, there's one that was not, it was cut by the committee, the student
Yes,
enrollment.
I know that one. So I'm on that committee, by the way, so.
Oh, okay.
So I do understand, which is why I'm curious, because in my view, there's a process coming up, which is a town meeting to address capital projects early enough so that we can have it in the same referendum as the budget. I would think that all of those ARPA capital items should be in that same submission, and when I didn't see, and particularly the air handler for this one, the $90,000 item, I was worried that we got completely lost somewhere, so.
No, I think that the selectmen are adding another meeting in to look at the rest of these items that,
Okay.
And, you know, obviously timing on a lot of these, I think Bob's talking about too, you've got summer projects and things where we need to get these
Yeah,
installed.
we only have so much, we only have a very narrow window when we can do in-school projects.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
And that's-
I touched
yeah.
on this last night at our
Okay.
Board of Selectmen meeting, but some of them we absolutely don't want to wait much longer on because the price of
And the
things
lead time.
continues to go up. And we've had the conversation about the facilities study, which was requested at $50,000 through a proposal with ARPA, but I'm understanding the price could be $200,000.
It could be up to 200,000 from what we're hearing, and so we're trying to get tighter on that. I'm working with Mr. Checo on that, and
So,
To me, of those two, the higher priority is the air handling unit, right?
So-
Which, by the way, fits the whole purpose of that grant. So of the three that we brought forward to the committee, the number one priority was the air handling unit of the three.
So Marcia, or I guess, just explain that again, why, let's talk about that specific one, where it's $90,000 that ARPA committee recommended, that was Board of Selectmen is recommending, and it's not in the capital budget. I just don't understand the mechanics of that. Explain it
so
again.
it was not submitted as part of this year's annual budget. It was, so it's kind of strange that some things were submitted as part of this year's
Submitted
capital
by-
budget, submitted by each of the departments.
Okay.
That, and so some things were submitted to the capital budget, some things were submitted to ARPA, but they weren't submitted to both. And
That's
some things
exactly
were
right.
submitted to both, and it got all messed up because they were both.
Yeah.
We were told to
'Cause-
do either or.
Right,
Correct.
Right, because we have, I mean, there are a number of, we have this other funding sources column with all the ARPA, all the things that are going to be paid for by ARPA.
But
So,
those came in as a capital request, and the air handler didn't.
So in
come
theory,
as a
what you would do
request,
is
not
you
as a
would
capital
patch in,
Right.
you would
Add
patch
it to
in
the
the
capital
ones that the
request.
Board of Selectmen
we
wants.
can do whatever. Sure,
I would
we
add
can.
it to a
Yeah.
So
capital
remember
request.
that the
Right.
capital requests were due back in October, and the ARPA was still going on, so that's why things were a little
So
bit
if it
separate.
doesn't get included in this, capital budget, how does it get
So
allocated or
so
appropriated?
I don't know what the legal thing is. From my reading of the charter, it would have to go from the selectmen to be approved. And so there's this column that you have in that
Yep.
Excel spreadsheet that if they're not in the budget, that they have to be approved by the selectmen. And then it would go to the Board of Finance. And I read that it should be a town meeting.
Right.
I don't think it has to be a referendum, but I
Right, so
think it needs to be a
Can
town.
we, yeah, can we,
Why don't we just add it to the
yeah.
capital list?
Can we, there's no reason that we can't, right?
'Cause then we can
Well,
track
we've
it. I
got to
appreciate
wait
you.
That's
until.
why I brought it up.
We've got to wait until the Board of Selectmen decide that, because there's some of these things that they're still working on. that,
But why would we have to wait? Because basically, it's a capital request from the school right now to put an air handler on the roof. How we fund it, the Board of Selectmen would decide, but it's still a capital request
Yeah.
from the school, from the raw basics.
Went through the ARPA committee.
Yeah, but it's from the raw basics, it's a capital request.
We need it, however, folks can make it work.
So-
But if we, but I think to Dan's point, if we keep it on 3 different lists, they get lost.
They
Yeah.
do, that's what my worry was.
So I
Right.
think that, so as far as the capital items, we've got the fire department, 375 would be capital. We can add that to the budget. That,
How we fund it is ARPA. I mean, that would just
Yep,
be an
yep,
ARPA
we
funding
can do
through the
that.
budget.
and then the only other one is the air handling, I guess, Still River Design.
We could talk about that though
Yeah.
later, because then we can get
But we
rid
can
of.
add it.
Yeah, no offense, but you guys can get out of here in a little while. We're gonna continue our meeting, because we got a lot to go through.
Yeah.
Yes, so I think we're at a point now where, with the Board of Ed, is there any questions we do have for the Board of Ed before they go? Go ahead, Ryan. I
Yeah,
know
we
you
had a
have question.
capital question on the cafeteria floor. We were wondering how bad that was. Is it a few tiles, or is this something that really needs to
Ken,
be?
you got to turn your mic on.
There are a lot of tiles. It's over in Wisconsin. A lot of them are cracked and chipping at the edges.
So
It's
thi-
all over.
So this would be a complete redo?
Yeah, absolutely,
Retile.
yes.
Gotcha.
And the one thing we've been very careful about, Ryan, is pouring money into each elementary school, knowing we have the new.
Right.
And really, that's why we talk about the building condition study and trying to get that, is because we really need to dig into the middle school and the high school now,
Yeah,
going forward.
makes total sense. Thank you.
I don't think we have any more questions. I mean, again, for the town, we already went through their budget line items, we've seen the data. This was more of a, like I say,
It
open
was a good
question
discussion.
dialogue instead of a
Yeah.
line item type of dialogue that we have. If we could get the data Tuesday night, Wednesday night, we'll see what we can do to fit this all together and
Okay.
come up with the best outcome we can come up with.
We can dedicate our meeting on Tuesday night pretty much to this, right?
I think we can.
You have our support, we just don't know where it's gonna land. I mean, this
Yeah.
is a tough year.
No,
I
we got
mean,
work to do.
I don't want you to go away thinking, oh, it's gonna be cut. We wanna work with you. We've all said we'd support you guys fully through the process. We just don't know exactly.
I don't think we have, I just will finish with, I don't think we have a magic bullet in our hands, and I don't think you have a magic bullet in your hands, and I think it's all about how we can share information so we can make some logical decisions for the town, so,
Right.
And then communicate it to everybody.
yeah.
And I think that's why this meeting was the way we had it. Instead, it was just an open discussion on where we're at. So if we get the data, we'll do the best we can. If you do the best you can, and we'll have to make a decision by the end of next week.
Okay.
And hopefully the decision will work for all of us.
Okay,
All right,
So we're gonna stay on.
thank you.
all right. So thank you very much for having us this evening.
Thank you.
And without objection, the Board of Education meeting is adjourned.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
You wanna take a, no, I guess we could just, take a 5-minute recess, please. Can we do that? All in favor? Aye. 200,000. Now, we've talked about that as a group. That is a liability that we have. The cut came to cut the funding. Marcia showed us the other night in her presentation. The OPEB committee is pretty, which I'm a member of, is pretty, they want that money put in due to the agreement with the ratings thing, so we have to look at that. But that is a cut that is still a liability. Go down to the next, the BOE we talked about. That 91 is a part of a $300,000 cut. The 208 was the increase in the insurance premium. The 91 is the balance of a $300,000 cut. We cut $71,000 out of the contingency fund, which right now, based on the fuel costs that are going up and gasoline and everything else, that's another line item that we're going to really have to discuss, because I think we got to go back to our 0.5% that Marcia keeps saying that we've agreed to in years past. Andy agreed to the next line item, I believe, right? The $40,000?
Andy provided it.
Okay.
We agreed to it.
Perfect. Legal is $35,000. Now, that was reduced because of the charter revision, correct?
No, that was the money that was for tax cases, and we have $45,000 in there now, and the attorney had felt that if we encumbered the $45,000 for what we know now, and we do encumbrance on a case-by-case basis, and then just put in $10,000 for anything new that comes up. There's time limits on when they can do this, and we should be finding out shortly when, how many that we'll actually have as far as cases, but we didn't know at that time.
Okay.
What was the number when we had the last assessment reval year?
So we didn't have it. We didn't have it broken out. As best I can tell, I did an analysis going back to those years to try and figure out what was in a pivot table, going back to try to figure out what was, looked like it was for tax cases and what didn't. And it looked like it was $80,000 or so. That, but we do, this estimate is based on the new attorney's estimate, and what we've heard from the assessor is where they think it'll be about 500 to dispose of cases that are not going to be worked out to cases and certain letters out and things. The old attorney was charging about 3,000, so it seems like it may be cheaper as but I have no personal knowledge other than the research.
Now, I have a question on that. So we have, can you do just legal costs, Ryan?
Legal cuts or legal costs?
Legal costs. That's not all our legal fees, though, because we have
So Ryan,
retainer.
it would be 4139 is the department.
Okay.
No.
No.
Is it 54139?
What's the whole number, Marcia?
1054139, but
Five.
I get it. Can you say that again, Marcia?
I don't have the 105 in any of these, so it's 4139 is the org.
Try 5.
The department.
This isn't going to work the way I want it to, but. All right. I guess my question is, on all the legal fees that we have, if we leave it all in these line items, can they be switched around without the Board of Finance consent?
Yes.
Okay. So we have 60,000 as a retainer, correct, for the year?
Yes. And these rules, by the way, about switching them are charter rules, and you can always make rules stricter that,
So basically in legal, we have 215,000 in legal right now,
yes,
of which 60,000 of it is the retainer.
yes.
10,000 of it's litigation. 59,000 is legal fees for what?
We always have little legal fees in there for, it doesn't include a court case, which is why you made a transfer a month or so ago. It includes small things that are, primarily it's been with the land use department and small cases there, but not something as big as going to court.
So then why would you reduce the line item tax litigation 35,000 out of 45,000 based on lower fees, but then the next line item be similar to the prior year? There's no benefit to this new attorney's rates on that line item?
My thought on the, when we were discussing it internally on the cost being cheaper is, I was assuming that this was the difference in the fees with maybe all the letters and the notices are the same, and that they might have more efficient processing of cases, of why they would be cheaper than the former attorney that.
I guess, not knowing the new attorney, I'm uncomfortable with 215 being out there that's discretionary other than the 60,000.
It's not their discretion, it'd be the selectmen that could move.
Correct, I agree. But I mean, we could get into a position where we don't know where we're gonna be. Okay, so we understand that now, right? That 60,000 is the retainer.
Yep.
The rest of the fees are in the buckets, but all those buckets can be moved within that line item without any control from the Board of Finance, is my understanding of this right now.
And I should point out that not all those buckets are the new attorneys, that we've got the labor attorney in there and the
Okay.
pension attorney
Yep.
in there as well.
Okay. I just, like I said, I'm having a difficult time with the reduction on one side being so much, but yet it's still the same rate going forward on the other account.
Do we have an idea of what's been spent on legal fees since we've had the new attorney to kind of project that out as a monthly? It's been a month, 2 months now?
So far, we've only been billed through the retainer, that there's been a lot of work done. I did ask at a separate meeting to say, we have no encumbrances, we have no purchase orders for anything else. Is all this covered under the retainer? And yes, it was part of building the relationship. This week, for the first time, we do have, and we've talked to them about how we do a purchase order when there's a case that, and for example, land use, that they may do a $2,000 purchase order every time there's a case. So there may be some small ones of those using the same amount. There is one case that we heard about this last week that is going to court, and the initial purchase order is going to be for $5,000. I don't know the details of the case, maybe Tara does.
Is that the one that's left over from last year's?
Not the one, this was Barbara Schellenberg, that she had some emails in the last week that.
We should be careful of,
She's
she's
the
the
attorney.
attorney.
yeah, no, yeah, but
So, and what we asked for was just the initial amount for the case, because it's not a fixed fee, and it's an hour by hour, so, where should we start with the purchase order? It may be higher, it might be lower.
Okay, all right.
what, so I know in the past, there was a little bit of a, calling the attorney, years ago was a little bit out of control, and people were just kind of picking up the phone and racking up fees, and it wasn't really tried. So what's the process now? Who has the authority to authorize bringing the attorney in? Who has the authority to authorize either eating into to the retainer or additional fees?
Well, we have a new land use director, and she's been great. And she brought up the fact that anyone in her department calls the attorney, and she's putting a stop to that. That it's got to go through her. And she felt as though a lot of the things didn't need to go to the attorney. So they're the biggest user of this 59,000. The other ones would be tax cases, but they would normally be a discussion, I believe, with the first selectman that, and Tara might be able to tell you more because I don't really use the attorney.
Well, I'd have to go back and look at some of the ways that Tom Beecher was billed to better understand how it's been done in the past, but
Okay.
I'll leave it at that.
Fair enough.
All right, let's go back to the cuts, Ryan. All right. The police will meet with, EMS will meet with, EMS will meet with, what was this one here based on, the 30,000 adjustment?
Do you want me to do that, Tara?
Oh, that one was capital, right?
That was, one of them, 22,000 was double accounted for, that it was, they were looking for new trucks, and they would do just the beds, and then the beds were also included here in the maintenance, and then it was the rest, so that was about 22,000 of the 30. And the rest, when we spoke with Parks and Rec, she said she would be happy with even 30.
Go down, that's police contingent, that's the reverse contingency of the salary.
Yes, and we did an analysis of the last 4 years of how much they've come in under, and the minimum, I think, was like 100,000, so we felt comfortable that it would be a little bit higher.
Okay. Charter revision, we estimated 30,000, and obviously the new attorney agreed to 5,000 to do this.
That is correct.
So then, what is the scope of that? I mean, is that 5,000 a hard number for the charter revision?
So, outside of the retainer, yes.
Okay, so we will revise our charter this year for $5,000 with the attorney. That's the only cost that will be outside of the retainer.
That is my understanding, yes. But retainer money can go towards the work towards the charter.
So then what happens when the retainer money runs out?
Well, the retainer is
We're
fixed.
also going to be having a commission, so
No, that really didn't answer my question, though. What happens when the retainer money runs out? We are going to this bucket of money, and all we did now, it sounds like, is he may still charge us 30,000 for the charter revision.
Right.
He's just going to take it out of the retainer money and say, now your bucket's empty. We're at the $60,000, and now anything I going forward is going to be billed at an hourly rate. So is he charging us only $5,000 and not charging any hours against the retainer for the charter revision? Because otherwise, that's a mute number.
Right.
That number is insignificant, that 5,000. If he's using the retainer money, we still may end up getting billed $90,000 for this, is what I'm trying to say, without having a distinct agreement of the retainer money is not being used for the charter revision, and when we do the charter division, all you're going to charge is $5,000 for that.
Otherwise, our retainer should be 90,000.
yeah,
not
I'll
outlined.
clarify and make sure what that looks like. He is putting together a proposal in writing regarding the charter, and we just started having that conversation because within the next month, I'm going to be working with the Board of Selectmen to get that commission established.
But we have to decide a budget now.
Yeah.
So next month isn't helping us with that number.
I will ask him as soon as this meeting is over.
Okay. Good.
Okay. And what was that one? I didn't ask the question on that.
That was
That's
two
okay.
things. 20,000 is the salary study, and 3,000 is a depreciation program. We're still waiting for our capital assets from the cheaper company that, and so we're not staying with them. This was a program that the auditors recommended, and so the 3,000 is a one-year cost. It'll be like 700 after that, but instead of putting it in your budget, we're moving the 3,000 to Dan Secor's budget for IT.
So where's the 20,000 for the salary study?
There is no salary study in this
So
budget.
are we going to have this discussion every time we go to hire somebody, or somebody comes to Fern and says, I need $10,000 more? Are we gonna always be in this perpetual circle? Because it's happened a lot of times, not even just under you, but in the last 5 years, we gave the Park and Rec guy $30,000 to stay, and he left us in a week because Ridgefield paid more. Why did we take out the survey for the salary study?
I mean, we just saw how much salary drives our budget in town. I don't see why we would cut something like this. I mean, salary is the biggest cost for this town across the board. So, 20,000 on a salary study per year, it's cheap insurance to make sure we're making the right decisions for our employees and for our taxpayers.
I thought, so you were suggesting a salary study? That's what you were asking for in your line item?
Yeah, I think that was actually in an email that I sent to you as well, that I suggested that.
So from the last meeting I think we were at together, you came with your own research from CCM on salary.
Yeah, that was me.
comparison.
That was Joe Public doing some homework.
So we want to pay a professional
I-
to do a salary study.
I think it'd be prudent, because all I hear out of the HR department is, we don't pay our people enough money, we don't do this, we can't get talent, we can't get a land use director for less than $120,000, and what'd we do? That was what was out there, that was the discussions that were being had. These were the discussions I was getting told, no way can we replace Alice Dew for under $120,000. In fact, it's gonna cost us more. So why wouldn't we understand the salary baselines that we're fighting every day?
So are we ready for the repercussions of that study? If we're way out of whack, can we afford to go that route? And if we're...
Are we going to ignore it and have it get us? I think part of this thought process is, we're not thinking in the year, we're thinking in the 3-year periods, the 4-year periods. I think that's the discussion we actually had tonight with the Board of Ed is, we know the debt bubble was coming. We tried to plan this out in years. We know we have big costs coming down the road of possible police stations and possible libraries and possible things. We need to get it right. I mean, and now's a good chance to get it right. The impact of the $20,000 study is, we might find we're overpaying people. Gee, then we might be able to reduce 2.5% pay raises down to 1.5% to get it right. You might get your money back in the first year. You're gambling that we're going to have the impact of, we're not paying enough.
No, I have no idea, but...
So then how do we
it's
put forth pay
interesting.
raises to anybody without really having an idea?
The
This has always
idea-
been my
The
crux.
idea I have is the same one you have, which is looking at what CCM can provide, looking across our region, our COG, our municipalities, our state, for that matter, and nothing is apples to apples, so, you know.
But that's where I think we need the outside help. Nothing is apples to apples. We have a really good pension plan. We work 35 hours a week compared to Newtown that does 37.5. And everyone says, oh, I don't get paid as much as Newtown, but Newtown does 12% more hours than you do a year. So by base, you're 12% out there. I would think this benefit would far outweigh understanding where we're going. I think this has been an unknown for us. This has been a problem. Harry, and I know you're sitting in the background, how many times has the first selectman come to you with $12,000 pay raises that we don't even know where they came from? We're dealing with it right now with the police, right? I mean...
That's for
there-
3 people.
3 people, but again, we should pay them fairly, so let's put that on the table. Do we know what fairly is? We have the data I got, I get that, but is that truly, am I looking at from a budget, and are you looking at from the CCM budget, benefits, health insurances, are we truly looking at the number? Do we really know what the number is that we should be paying our people?
I'm just not sure. We don't even know, is it $20,000? Have we gotten a cost estimate on that? That's not something I asked to do. I know in the past Marcia had a cost comparison, but
The 20,000 is a cost estimate from right before COVID. It was cut with the COVID cuts, that it was 500 per position, and so at that time, I think it was 18,000. So that's what the 20 is based on.
Okay.
I see both sides of that argument. I got to think about it. I do see studies that are, throwing good money after, and
Agreed.
it's not worth the paper it's on. But I do know that we're throwing every year 2 or 3. We need to do this. We need to do that. We need to right size this. We need to
Every
right size
year.
that every year. So I see. I got to think about it.
The problem is every year.
I agree.
And we don't know when we make the step, are we making the right step?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. All right, let's, 20,000, what was this one? Did we have a,
That one was to bring it in line with the prior year actuals.
so the prior year actual 184, you're down from prior year, right?
That if you look at a few more years back, I think that,
So you took an average?
Well, we also have some new equipment in the capital budget, so maybe they'll have some less stuff to repair. I mean, they'll have maintenance, but repairs are usually more expensive.
Okay. Let's go down, tree removal, all right.
Is there any state money in the tree removal? I know that, sometimes with the invasive species, I feel like the state's chipped in on, the emerald ash borer and that kind of stuff, disease trees. I think we've talked about it in the past, but I don't know if that might be considered.
I don't know about that, Eileen, but I think this one is for, like the storm we had last night. I did see the Brookfield wood chipper being pulled around today. So I think it's for just tree trimming and tree removal. It's rotting, hanging over a road, that kind of thing is what Ralph was saying. I don't know about invasive species though.
So on the tree, the tree removal, yeah, so let's go prior years here. Let's go back to a few prior years. So we did 73, 72, 59, okay, so you're 75, now you brought it back down to 60. So now, are we gonna neglect the service here to get to 60? Or do we think it's really, we could do the job for 60?
So this was one that Ralph Tedesco was okay with after having several conversations with him. I don't know if it's going to be less services, and he mentioned it depends on storms and it depends on a lot of other factors, I guess. But he seemed fine with this cut.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, Conservation Commission. We took out most of their budget. So what was the basis of the 14,000 on that? Because it looks like prior year's 11,800. Is there information that you have that drive that number down?
Conservation Commission.
there was a $6,000 and an $8,000 payment that we would pay to Gursky, on the Gursky properties that should come out of the Gursky fund instead of the general fund.
Okay.
And how much is in the Gursky fund?
There's $83,000 that can be spent for, that's unrestricted, that can be spent on this type of stuff as of June 30th of '21, and any profits that would have been made this year on the rental properties.
So the rules changed.
No.
So then why weren't we doing that prior years, using the Gursky fund to fund those line items?
I don't know.
Prior year was only 8,000.
Right, but if we have 60-something thousand in these accounts,
Yeah.
why wouldn't we have, I mean, that's the first I've heard that we had this money in there. So basically, next year, we could still use the Gursky money to fund it, so that number's not gonna change going forward for the years. We have a few years' worth of, in the fund. Does the fund grow?
The fund has grown because we have been making profits on there. There's a few years where if we do larger, we do repairs to that property, and we pay for that out of that, but for the most part, it's been growing. And we used a big chunk of that fund to buy 43 Silver Mine.
Okay. Yep,
And that's
yep.
when the analysis
Yep.
was done of what could be used out of that fund versus what couldn't, and that's when it started to be divided up.
Okay, thank you, good explanation. The library, this has changed, or that's the full cut now, 22,000? I thought 11,000 went back of that.
That's the first selectmen's budget.
Oh, there it is,
Sorry.
okay, apologize. Okay. All right. Okay, next. Sand and salt, small amount, right over to 213. Sewer, water assessment.
That one, we don't have the assessments calculated yet, that this is the Candlewood Lake Road. And the original paperwork, when Steve and Greg did the paperwork for how much the assessment was going to be, it was like 73,000, but the expenses have come in much cheaper, so the assessment should be cheaper, and so this was the same percent. We're meeting with the attorney on Friday to start that process of calculating the final assessments.
Okay. All right, next. This Andy was okay with? The training? This was agreed to by fire department or not? Was this your cut or agreed to by the fire department?
That
Are
is,
there notes on the side of this?
that is the terrace cut, that we had some open questions on that there's a substantial profit that's made on the training, and we didn't want to pay the marked up price. And they had said that, no, there's no profit, but we look at it differently. The financial statements show that there's about $40,000 that was earned last year on training. But they do spend that all on equipment for the fire department. So that's why they're saying it's not a profit. So that's still, we're still working through that. We met with them on Thursday of last week. We talked about the training and what we're going to do, what they're going to do is reconfigure their financial reporting. Right now, we've got a column for fire, a column for EMS, and a column for everything else. And what they're going to do is 2 columns for fire, one of what we're paying and one of what they're paying, just to make it more transparent that, okay, you did earn $40,000 in training and this is how you spent it. And then we'll do the same thing for EMS, what we're paying, what they're paying, and we talked about spend our money first, and then spend your money. And then a 5th column is all the organizational things that we don't need to get into as far as the town. We're not funding any of that, and they will be putting any money that we get from FEMA based on their labor into their organizational column. But I think that we have a much, that would be a lot clearer to all of us to see what's coming in, what's going out, for anything that we care about. And I think that Lou was still trying to get his arms around it, but I think we're all in agreement that we like that.
Okay. We'll talk to them when they get there. Hazardous waste, we got that right, that we all understood.
I mean, my understanding is that the hazardous waste days are actually pretty well attended by the Brookfield residents. Is there a reason why we took that out? I thought that the $8,000 accounted for the actual Brookfield hazardous waste day.
Which is the only one we have, right?
Yeah, the only one that
So
Brookfield hosts.
Ralph's explanation, and Jennifer, I don't recall him, Heaton Jones, had explained to me at the onset of my tenure, that surrounding towns all have it,
Mhm.
and it's free to Brookfield residents to attend each and every single one of those events. So Ralph said that this was something that, I mean, unless we surveyed the town and got a sense of whether or not they still wanted it.
Do we have comparison numbers of how many people, because we get charged back how many Brookfield residents use the surrounding town ones, right? Do we have any idea do we have those numbers of how many have used surrounding towns versus how many showed up to ours? To know, if only 20 people went out to Newtown, but we get 200 showing up to Brookfield, is this a disservice to the Brookfield residents who would use it if it's in town?
I haven't done that research, and I would also ask, when was the last time, I don't even know when this program was implemented,
They've been doing it annually, like
since when?
several years at least.
Well, go back through, Ryan, go the other way. No, down, no, go left,
Go-
left,
yeah.
left, take a left. So, I mean, I would say it started there in 2019 to 2020, because that's when your
Okay.
number jumps, right?
Yeah.
So for 3 years, we've been doing this.
So, yes, that they switched, we may have been doing it longer because they switched the way they did the billing. A few years back, we used to get revenue from that, and now we're not getting revenue from that. So that the change there may have been more to do with the way they did the billing.
So the reasoning behind the cut was we would get rid of the day, but we would save the money, is the reasoning behind the cut, is a cost savings. It may be not as easier for the town residents to do, but it was a place we needed to see what we could do to trim the budget.
That's accurate, yes. However, we don't know what the cost would be for residents to attend other towns, because we don't know how many people would go. I guess we could look at previous years where they have gone to other towns and what we've been billed, but I have not done that.
I don't have the numbers in my head, but it is on the bills.
Okay, next one. This is just a premium.
The premiums, we were on a 3-year agreement that the premiums wouldn't go up more than 3% a year. So the original budget was based on that 3% a year. But if we sign with them for another 3-year agreement, that they'll put the premium at 0. So this brings the one premium to 0, the biggest of the premiums in there to 0.
Okay. All right, next, EMS, we'll talk to Andy there. Land use planning. This was, obviously, the department put in a request for $7,000 to go to a conference, and we cut it down to $210.
The prior land use director put in some computer training on systems that we've had in place. And there was a $2,000 training and a $4,000 training. And the current land use director didn't think that that was necessary.
Right.
And so she cut the 6, and then the rest is other training.
Yeah, I can see the prior years really aren't a lot of money anyway, right? I mean, 4910. All right. Facilities. Prior years, so you just based it on prior years. 2 years there, 16.
Was there anything in particular that drove it up to an ask of 23,000 from 16?
I'm more interested in
It
what
was
drove
90.
it down. I don't
Oh.
remember. Yeah. All right.
Well, we got some didn't we get some new air handlers and stuff like that?
That had to be explained to us back then, and why they drove it from 90 to 16, and
Yeah.
then used actual, so I'm okay there. Center Fire Department. This was equipment, 6,000. Okay. No, we'll talk with the fire department.
That one was that we had asked for an explanation that they had increased an account called purchases. And when we asked what that was, they said, oh, no, it was just a reshuffling, that it wasn't a new account. And so we asked, well, what accounts went down for that to go up, that if it's just a reshuffling, and we didn't get a response. But when we met with them on Thursday, they said that it was one of the accounts that they paid for went down, and the account that we pay for went up.
Okay. Go down one more. So that's in line with prior years. That's how you got to that number, basically, 159, 199, 205. So yeah, let's talk about that. What is that now? Because it was prior year 199, original budget 205, department request 230. What was the increase was 25,000, but you told me took out 5,000 on the backside.
Do you want me to handle that one? So we've got some multi-year contracts, for example, for lawn maintenance. And we had a contract that came in really low 3 years ago. It's like 10,000 below. It's up for renewal, and we didn't think we would get the same great deal that we got that first time. So some of this is increased because of that. And so essentially, this was brought to the same level as last year, plus a few of these increases that are known, for those estimated increases for lawn maintenance. I think there was another contract in there. And the other increase is the $15,000 for renting the snow removal equipment that is going to be used at Huckleberry is in here.
Okay. That's 15,000. I thought we agreed to that.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
Can you, with
Go
the
ahead.
registrar of voters, the forms and printing, if they ask for 15, usually that's estimated on a certain amount of usage. Is there a reason why that was cut down to 10?
Because they've never used 15.
Okay, so it's only after historical data? I just assumed that if they were asking for 15, it was because they knew of something that they needed for. Okay.
Okay, yep. Finance, what's that 5,000 cut there?
I had asked for our deputy controller to be paid for more hours, that he works well over 40 hours a week. We have other departments that when they work overtime, they get paid extra, even though their salary based on one-off deals. And I use him a lot and thought that I'd like him to be paid for 37 and a half hours a week, similar to what we pay the purchasing agent.
And what was the rationale behind taking that out instead of increasing to 37 and a half hours?
Are you asking me?
Yes,
That I
please.
wasn't going to entertain any one-offs because when I walked in the door, I was hit several times for people looking for increases. So to your point about the salary study, I don't want to talk about individuals, but everybody is very different and they bring different skill sets to the table.
I agree with the answer, but if we do the 37 and a half for the purchasing, we've already done it once and set precedents, and if someone is willing to work 37 and a half hours and we have a need for that, we're not really, we're increasing the salary, but we are increasing the hours worked and the output. So it's not like we take a 35-hour employee and we're giving them an extra him or her, an extra $5,000. This is actual hours worked. So if there's a need for the hours worked, this to me isn't a one-off as in a pay increase. This to me is more hours working for the same pay.
Filling the need.
Filling a need. I just was trying to understand the rationale behind it, because if we've done it once, well, you didn't do it once, in fairness to you.
Which one are you talking about?
The finance, deputy finance. So we do it for the purchasing agent. The purchasing agent, we have a 37.5-hour contract for.
That's the part-time? Wait, no, that's.
No, the purchasing agent, the one we split between the Board of Ed and the Board of Finance is 37, or not Board of Finance, the town.
Right.
It's 37.5 hours a work week. That's the work week we're paying that $90,000 salary on. Okay. We're good. Let's go down. It's in line. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Are we still on Zoom?
Yeah.
Yeah, the screen is highlighted.
So that was cut by the Board of Selectmen, not.
IT communications.
Oh, this is the Code Red.
Okay. So we cut the code red, or we reduced it, or how do we get to that number?
That's the number Dan gave for the cost for Code Red, and it's been cut.
What is the, I mean, we used Code Red during, what, macro burst and the, what, is that, that wasn't just started for COVID, was it? That was started for the macro burst and for the storms too, right?
It was just COVID.
That was just COVID,
yeah.
okay.
Then we're not using it anymore. Okay. Go back, go over, yeah, to the left there, go down now, yeah.
So just, there's, if in case of a emergency, we
Yep.
still have the police, Everbridge, I believe it's called. That is a mass messaging system
Okay.
that's at our disposal as well, so that's always there should the need
Okay.
arise.
That's good.
Okay, go down. What's the prior years of all this? 742, it's in line. Okay, so on this one, well, we'll go back up one. What's the rationale behind this? Because we ended up at
50. Yeah, 52 in prior year.
Is this another recycling line?
Yeah. Recycle, refuse.
So that is, we're no longer paying, let me make sure I know the right. We're no longer paying New Milford, and, but the budget was always short on the brush yard stuff. And so the brush yard went up and the New Milford went down.
Okay.
Please, we'll talk with them. Go down land use planning, legal notices.
Well, why is that, if it was 8:45?
Yeah, what drove the request?
The 845 during COVID, there was, they removed the requirement for legal notices.
Oh,
So go to the left more, no, left, Brian, I'm sorry.
We don't have a great estimate on that because if you remember that it was all paid out of the town clerk's one line item for every legal notice, but for a control point of view, she's just signing off on them and doesn't know if they've been in, so we divided them between departments. As soon as we divided them between departments, the penny saver went under, and then so we finally were going to get some good data to see if the budgets were a nice division, and then COVID hit and we didn't have to do it. So we have yet to have a good year to compare it to.
how about the Brookfield Magazine?
Fair enough.
Can we get them to publish these?
But again, the new land use director, she's excellent. That she's cutting way back on what's going to go into the newspaper, so we do expect savings.
Legislation's also looking at doing away with it, going to paper. Maybe, they are working on it from what I understand.
They do that every year,
If it were
and they lose.
use the website, like,
Yeah,
that's
that'd
more
be nice.
public
All
than
right, we'll go
anything.
through all
Yeah.
the fire, go down to assessor. One up, I think, is assessor. No, that's assessor. 15, 19, 20, so you're in line with prior years, basically.
However, that in prior years, we had cut the personal property audits, and this remains cut in the personal property audits.
So what does a personal property audit entail?
It's a deterrent to people not, to people claiming the wrong things on their personal property. That so every year you audit a few, and just like why the IRS audits, you audit a few, and then people have the fear of God that they may be audited.
And that would cost $3,500?
Yes.
With all of the people that have moved into town recently and the switch over of houses, was that?
No, this is just personal property, which is just businesses.
Okay, all right. Good enough, thank you. All right, let's go down. Down, Spraddle, 2,500, okay, personal. That's in line, that's in line there, go down, that's in line. Down one more, Ryan. That's EMS, we'll talk to Andy. You're at 0, you're not going anywhere, are you, Marcia?
We're asked to cut the non-required training for every department, and mine was no exception.
Yep. Going down.
What's the police photo ID?
The police photo ID was in their budget, but we talked to Doc, and he paid for that the last time, and he would have room in a grant that he gets, and so that was moved out of the police budget and into, and we'll pay for it out of the grant.
So this is really pennies, but on youth commission, this is a program that I really, I think is great. You know, $1,500 is nothing to us, but what is the youth commission losing by cutting that by half?
So the Board of Selectmen and I looked at that, and we just agreed to cut it in half. This is the first year ask, so we started at 1,500 and see how they do with that. And then there was nothing specific associated with that ask.
Okay.
Go down, Ryan. Keep going. That's all travel.
Dues and fees. That's up a lot from what is the year before?
They had a Main Street program that has been in their budget every year, but they haven't been joining.
Oh,
So
okay. Thanks.
Go back up to, this one just go up to Canada Fire.
$500.
The $500, what's the logic behind that? What drove that $500 cut?
every department was cut, so sharing the pain.
Go down.
So, historic, that's travel and conferences implemented.
Keep going down.
So, well, I mean, I'm looking at the Historic District Commission, and they've asked for $775, and they got cut 500 of it, and they had 3,700 in years before. Is it necessary to cut them 500?
Hold on, let me look at my notes.
While she's doing that, Ryan, take from the 850, go up to 850, then drop it down to the bottom, all the way down here, and give me a sum. Or no, drop it down to the cuts here. Go to the, up to the 150, up to the 150, higher, 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 right there, down one. What's the sum of that?
Show me on the screen share here.
850, let's go below the 1,000 mark. 7,000 on, how many cuts is that? How many line items, just for?
And while you're doing that, Historic District Commission, that is to cut it to prior years. And
18
the one
cuts.
year that you're looking at there had a one-time expense for it, for new signs that were in last year's budget for, or 21's budget for the effects of the hurricane.
Yeah. All right. On that, I'm done. So let's go to, we'll close this out soon, but let's go to add-ins, Marcia. Let's do some what-ifs.
All right.
And just for, this is just to see where we go,
Go for it.
okay?
I've done this on my own, but you go for it. I know we've all done it. Go for it.
So can Marcia take over the screen? Or no? We don't need you to take over the screen. Well, no, I'd like you to take over the screen, I think. Is that possible?
It is. I'm just trying to get my,
Man behind the curtain.
what do I want?
Yeah.
This one.
Yep.
And while we're waiting for that, Ryan, thank you, because this, I think, is going to be
Yeah.
something we could use even for the departments. You should be able to pull out, like, the EMS or the fire department, we could talk to their line items specifically without having to pull up the sheet and all the way it ties in.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Every day.
It does.
On that, those 18 items at the bottom at the 7,400, there were, I think, a few that were travel and conferences in there.
Okay. That makes sense.
All right, let's see how well you know your departments.
All right.
All right, let's put 100 in OPEB.
All right. Actually, how fast I can do this without a mouse.
We lost you. There we go.
Five two 902 if that helps.
Oh, we keep losing it. Let's go to the cash capital quick.
All right.
Let's put 80,000 back into the Candlewood Fire Reserve. Okay, let's, any of the, just for, this is just an exercise purpose, any, the fields you want to look at?
Yeah.
Go ahead,
The,
Dan, or Brian, go ahead.
Both vehicle reserves, fire and EMS.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're covered, I think, in that, what I showed you is we're gonna use the ARPA money for that to cover them, so we don't need to fund that till next year because of the way it lays out. And I'll show you that in that other model that I had, because I have their bank accounts, their cash flow, their operational costs laid out in a 10-year cash flow. So we can see what their start balance is in their bank accounts, what they're gonna spend on their accounts, the operating costs annually that they have out of their accounts and their vehicles. So I can show that in a 10-year plan where they end up. And each of them have enough cash to cover a lot of things.
That's fair.
So we can look at that.
How much out of ARPA would that be, Glenn?
Your ARPA, you said you were paying for the fire truck for
Yeah.
center, right?
Oh, that's the vehicles we're talking about for the reserve?
The reserve, we're not buying Candlewood a truck this year. So that's the only reserve you need to replace, because you're paying for, I believe, what I understand is you're buying an ambulance and you're buying a fire truck under ARPA.
That's right.
So those reserves are 175 right now. So we're not taking their reserve money, are we? We're using the ARPA money to fund fully.
Right.
So basically, we're funding them their
Oh, I see what you're
reserve
saying.
money
Okay.
through the ARPA. We're not touching what they have in their account, the
So there'll still be a
175.
reserve after the ARPA.
So it'd still be a reserve after we buy the vehicle going forward.
And then next year we'll contribute.
The next year, we have to, well, we gotta talk about contributing.
Yeah.
Y'all understand why
Yep.
it was only the one going back in?
Yep.
Okay.
All right, since we're doing what ifs, how about those 200 was taken out for the track replacement reserve? Let's put 100
Yep.
back in for now.
Yep. And tennis courts are in the capital plan for this year, right? So that,
Yes.
that doesn't
Yeah.
need a
Right.
reserve. Okay.
All right, let's go to the fire, let's go to or center fire
Operating or capital?
operating.
So is that going to carry through to the operating
No,
budget?
I'm
You have
going to
copy
type it
There you
in
go.
right here. I think it was 180 that you added back there.
Yeah, 180.
Okay. Let's make sure we die out. Okay.
Either go to education or to fire, whatever you find easier.
Education is closer.
All right. Put 300,000 in there.
Max it out, okay.
And then the fire.
Contingency.
The training we can leave, then we'll talk about it, but what else did we, boom, boom, boom.
So there was a total of, the agreed upon cuts for them was the 1,800. The applied cuts to them was this 13,000.
So put 13,000 back in.
Okay.
Give Kennemal back 500. Let's put in the finance, the 50, whatever, 9, whatever.
So you're gonna add the salary study back in?
Just want to see where we land. It's a possibility. This is not what we're adding back in. This is just an exercise.
Yeah.
Let's go to the police chief captain.
Major.
Major. Now, the 14,000 covered all 3 positions to get them where they,
Yes, 2 for the chief and 6K for the other 2.
put back in the 14,000 there.
So the 14 is in.
Oh, so that's in. Okay, so it's up to there. My apologies. I apologize. All right, where do we stand right now? Well, wait. Anybody else have any thoughts on anything
Just
glaring?
the
glaringly?
the
Oh, the contingency.
contingency.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Contingency. Thank you, Eileen.
The fire insurance, is that what it is? The fire,
Oh, the LoSiP?
yeah.
That's the other one that they talked about contributing because there's a liability.
Okay, where do we stand?
Tax-wise.
Hmm?
sorry, no. 411.
And what's the proposed dollar change, 2.8?
3.3.
Okay.
Expenses.
2.8 is tax, yes.
Yeah.
That's cool. We haven't touched revenue yet, so there might be movement on the margin.
Marcia, did we have anything going into LoSiP?
LoSiP, we do have, LoSAP, the.
LoSAP, sorry, yes.
That.
Then there's the LOTSIP grant and.
No, that we don't have a trust, we don't have a line item, but we could allocate some, put it
How
on
does
the
that work?
OPEB line item for now if you wanted to.
We will discuss that when the fire department's there. How's
Okay,
that?
that works.
Because there's a plan in place on that that's
Oh.
going to fund that.
Okay.
So I've spoken and had a thought process that I think I can get buy-in.
Okay.
So, okay, we could bring, well, no, it's getting late anyway, so we won't do that. So then what was that's our changes, what was the selectmen dollar changes? Is that still in play? Can we still see that number? Or you might have it here, right?
What are we talking about?
What was the selectmen's?
The bottom line of the selectmen was 9,307.
What was the increase in dollars, though? I mean, over prior year?
We no longer have that data.
Yeah, Dan
but-
does, though.
77 over versus 74, is that, those are the two numbers, right?
Yeah, so what's the?
2.7.
Okay. So the selectmen was $2.7 million increase. We're a lot higher with what we just did in our exercise. I guess part of this exercise, I wanted to see where we'd land, but part of this exercise was public comment the other night at 0% and how we are incompetent pretty much as a Board of Finance at 0%. And that was also one of the driving campaign things is why wouldn't we look at it as we take that 2.2 million and make a motion to the Board of Selectmen to cut 2.2 million out to balance the budget, because that was also a word used in the last presentation. So why wouldn't we say, to keep it to zero? Because I'm looking at adding from our side, but public comment the other night that was made that this was our budget, and we listened to public comment, and this was the Board of Finance budget, but really it was a Board of Selectmen budget, is why wouldn't we make a motion now to say we task the Board of Selectmen to remove $2.2 million from the town operating budget without touching the education line? I'm trying to see where you stand on this, Tara, like in the public, because there was a public comment made, and I just need to know where you, as our first select woman, stands on the 0% increase going forward on this. I mean,
So that keeps coming up, 0% increase. I don't see the last night's Board of Selectmen meeting with public comment on the agenda. I don't think it's appropriate to have anything that's not germane to budget discussions as part of this
okay. Then
conversation.
we're good then. I'm good. We can make the motion tomorrow night then if we think
Do whatever
about
we
it. Okay.
And there wasn't a motion made to actually come back to general budget discussions either, just.
Oh,
Perfect. All right. I'm good. Any other questions then for tonight?
Don't think we're allowed.
No, we're good.
okay.
All right.
Is there any public comment?
Any public comment? Hearing none, I'll make a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Meeting adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Sounds good.